In 1861, the United States was not marching confidently toward becoming a world power. It was walking toward collapse. On paper, it was a young republic with a constitution, elections, a congress, a president, and a flag that spoke of union. But beneath that flag, two different societies were growing inside the same country. One believed the future belonged to free labor, factories, railroads, cities, and a stronger national government. The other believed its wealth, its social order, and its political power depended on cotton, plantation agriculture, and the enslavement of millions of human beings. For decades, politicians tried to delay the crisis. They compromised. They drew lines on maps. They admitted one free state and one slave state. They argued about territories, rights, courts, and constitutions. But the real question was much larger than any single law. Could a nation founded on liberty survive while millions were denied liberty? And if one group of states disliked the result of an election, could they simply leave? The Civil War was not just a war between North and South. It was a war over the meaning of the United States itself. Was America a loose agreement, a club that states could quit when they wanted? Or was it a nation, one country, indivisible? That question would not be answered in a courtroom. It would be answered by cannon fire. The first scene is not a battlefield filled with marching armies. It is a harbor, Charleston, South Carolina. In the early morning darkness of April 12, 1861, soldiers inside Fort Sumter waited on a small island surrounded by enemy guns. South Carolina had already left the Union. Other southern states had followed. A new government, the Confederate States of America, had been formed. Its president was Jefferson Davis, a former U.S. Senator and former U.S. Secretary of War. But Fort Sumter still flew the United States flag. That made it more than a military post. It was a symbol. To the Confederacy, the fort was a foreign object inside Southern territory. To Abraham Lincoln, it was federal property inside the United States. If he abandoned it, he would send a message that secession had worked. If he reinforced it, he might start a war. Lincoln chose a narrow path. He announced that he would send supplies, not an invading army. Food, not conquest. But in Charleston, Confederate leaders decided they could not allow the U.S. flag to remain there. At 4:30 in the morning, the first shot was fired. The cannon blast over Fort Sumter was the sound of compromise dying. For decades, Americans had spoken of disunion as a threat, a possibility, a nightmare. Now it was real. And once the shooting began, both sides discovered something terrifying. They had entered a war far larger than they understood. At first, many Northerners thought the rebellion would collapse quickly. They believed the Union had more people, more factories, more railroads, and more money. But the Confederacy had its own confidence. Many Southern leaders believed they were defending their homes, their states, and their way of way. They had experienced military officers. They had men trained in hunting, riding, and arms. They believed Northern society lacked the will to fight a long, bloody war. Both sides were wrong in different ways. The North underestimated the South's resistance. The South underestimated the North's capacity to mobilize. And almost everyone underestimated the cost. To understand why the war came, we have to go back to the contradiction at the center of the country. By the middle of the 19th century, the North and South were tied together, but they were no longer moving in the same direction. In the North, industry was expanding. Cities were growing. Railroads linked markets. Immigrants arrived. Wage labor, banks, and schools became part of life. In the South, cotton was king. Enslaved labor made plantation wealth possible. The value of enslaved people as property was enormous, and the political power of slaveholding elites shaped Southern society far beyond the plantations themselves. This was not simply an economic difference. It became a moral, political, and constitutional crisis. Northern politicians increasingly opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories. Southern leaders saw that as an existential threat. If new states entered the Union as free states, the South would lose power in Congress. If the federal government could limit slavery's expansion today, perhaps it could attack it tomorrow. Then came the election of 1860. Abraham Lincoln was not yet the marble figure from monuments. He was a tall, awkward politician from Illinois. He did not run on a promise to abolish slavery everywhere. His public position was more limited. Slavery should not expand into the territories. But to many Southern leaders, that was enough. Lincoln's victory convinced them that the balance of power had shifted. South Carolina moved first. In December 1860, it declared that it was leaving the Union. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. Before Lincoln even took office, the United States was already breaking apart. The crisis began not after he ruled, but after he won an election. The South's secession was a rejection of the political system itself. That made the war about slavery, but also about democracy. Lincoln understood this. If secession succeeded, then democracy itself would be weakened. He was talking about whether a government chosen by ballots could survive bullets. At the beginning, the official Northern goal was to preserve the Union, not to abolish slavery everywhere. Many white Northerners opposed slavery's spread but were not prepared to fight for racial equality. Some border slave states remained in the Union, and Lincoln feared pushing them into the Confederacy. So the war began with a limited goal: save the Union. But wars have a way of changing their own meaning. As Union armies moved south, enslaved people changed the war from the ground up. They forced the president to confront the reality that slavery was the foundation of Confederate power. To leave slavery untouched was to leave the rebellion's engine running. The first major battle at Bull Run in July 1861 shattered the illusion of a quick war. Civilians had come out almost as spectators, expecting to witness a Union victory. Instead, the Union Army was defeated and retreated in panic toward Washington. The message was clear: this war would not be won by enthusiasm. It would require armies, discipline, money, and industry. In the East, the Confederacy found one of its greatest military figures, Robert E. Lee. A commander of remarkable skill, he became the face of the Confederate effort. His victories gave the Confederacy hope. This was the South's strategy: not to conquer the North, but to make the war so costly that the North would quit. In the West, however, another figure was rising: Ulysses S. Grant. He was quiet, plain, but he had something Lincoln needed: persistence. Grant understood that the Confederacy could not simply be pushed back. Its armies had to be broken. Its capacity to wage war had to be destroyed. That kind of war would be brutal. The turning point in the moral meaning of the war came on January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not free every enslaved person immediately. It applied to areas in rebellion, not to loyal border states. But politically and morally, it changed everything. Lincoln declared that enslaved people in the rebellious states were to be free. The war was no longer only a war to restore the old Union. It became a war to create a new Union, a Union without slavery. The proclamation also allowed black men to serve in the Union armed forces. By the end of the war, black soldiers and sailors would play a crucial role in the fight for union and freedom. Once emancipation became a war aim, the Confederacy's hope for foreign recognition became much weaker. Supporting a slaveholding rebellion became far more difficult. Still, proclamations do not win wars by themselves. In 1863, the Confederacy still fought fiercely, and Robert E. Lee made a dangerous decision. He would invade the North again. The place where the armies collided was a small town in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg. Armies stumbled toward it because roads met there. Ordinary places become turning points. On the third day, Lee ordered a massive assault. Thousands of Confederate soldiers stepped into open fields. This attack, known as Pickett's Charge, failed. The Confederate army was forced to retreat. And almost at the same time, far to the west, Union forces captured Vicksburg, gaining control of the Mississippi River and splitting the Confederacy. This is where the Civil War enters its most terrifying phase: total war. The Union increasingly targeted not only armies, but the systems that kept armies alive. Grant, placed in command of all Union armies, pressed Lee relentlessly in Virginia. He did not retreat after one bloody battle. He kept moving: Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, Petersburg. The war began to look less like the wars of the 18th century and more like the industrial wars that would come later: mass armies, railroads, telegraphs, and national mobilization. Meanwhile, William Tecumseh Sherman marched through Georgia. His campaign was designed to break Confederate confidence. The message was simple: the rebellion could not protect its own heartland. War had come home. In 1864, he faced re-election. The war had lasted far longer than expected. Casualties were immense. Many Northerners were tired. Some wanted negotiation. In his second inaugural address, Lincoln did not speak like a triumphant conqueror. He spoke like a man standing under judgment. He recognized slavery as the central cause of the war and suggested that the suffering of the conflict was connected to the nation's long injustice. His words looked beyond victory. They pointed toward reconciliation, but not at the cost of forgetting what the war had been about. Then came April 1865. Richmond, the Confederate capital, fell. Lee's army, exhausted and surrounded, retreated west. At Appomattox Courthouse, Robert E. Lee met Ulysses S. Grant. Grant offered generous terms. The message was deliberate. The war was ending. The Union did not need endless revenge. Yet the story did not end with surrender. Just days later, Abraham Lincoln went to Ford's Theater in Washington. There, he was shot by John Wilkes Booth, an actor and Confederate sympathizer. Lincoln died the next morning. Winning the war was one problem. Rebuilding the country was another. 4 million formerly enslaved people now stood at the center of a transformed nation. What would freedom mean? Land, schools, voting rights, legal equality, protection from violence, citizenship. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the United States. That was a revolutionary change written into the Constitution. But abolishing slavery did not automatically create equality. Reconstruction became the unfinished second act of the Civil War. The United States emerged from the Civil War with a stronger federal government, a preserved union, and a constitution transformed by the abolition of slavery. But it also emerged with wounds that did not close quickly. The war ended slavery, but not racism. It preserved the Union, but did not settle all arguments over federal power and states' rights. It created a new birth of freedom, but left future generations to fight over what that freedom would actually mean. The Civil War did not complete the American promise, but it made a new America possible, and from that moment on, the United States would move toward becoming not just a country on a map, but one of the central powers of the modern world. The price was terrible. The consequences were permanent. And the question it answered still echoes. Can a nation survive its deepest contradiction and be reborn on the other side?